Om Prithivi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyav Shantir Disha Shantiravantar Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shanti Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shanti Shantireva Shanti Shantirme Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvasatbuddhimapnotu, sarvasarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om.
We will sing the Song of the Sannyasam on the last 2 pages in the book. Wake up,
release at last thy blessed soul forever. No more is birth, nor I, nor thou, nor God, nor man, the eye has all become. The all is our bliss. Go thou art there, sannyas bold, say home,
Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravir Mayeti Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. The song that we sang in the beginning is called one of the very well-known poems of Swami Vivekananda called Song of the Sannyasin. He composed it in the year 1895 at Thousand Island Parks in upstate New York, where he gave a 7-week retreat. It's a very powerful song, and many of you are familiar with it. It always brings back to my mind my memories when I was a teenager and was studying in college, and by which time had almost decided to become a monk. And so every day on my way to college, I would recite this song. So it just brings back all those old memories every time we sing this one. So our subject today is renunciation myths. Now, in one form or another, renunciation is a necessary practice in every religious tradition, although it's not always called by that name. The word renunciation tends to be a little bit intimidating, also a little bit terrifying to most people, compared to, say, terms like sacrifice or detachment or letting go. Those terms are not so terrifying, although the idea conveyed is more or less the same. Among the quotes that immediately come to mind, emphasizing the need to renounce, one is, of course, the well-known one in Matthew 19:21. We see Jesus answered, "If you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasures in heaven. Then come, follow me. Then there is in the Upanishads, in the Vedas, with this very another well-known passage. Sanskrit, it goes like this: Na karmana, na prajaya, dhanena, tyage naike, amritatva manashuhu. Which means, neither through good work, nor family, nor wealth, but through renunciation alone can immortality be reached. Renunciation also is an ideal emphasized in the Vedanta tradition, especially as we see it manifested through the lives of Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and Swami Vivekananda. Once Sharda Devi, the Holy Mother, was asked what, according to her, was the most important teaching of Sri Ramakrishna. Now, for many of us, I think, the first thing that would come to mind is his teaching that all religions lead to the same goal. The idea of religious harmony, which is no doubt a very important teaching in Ramakrishna's life. But what Holy Mother said was this: renunciation is Sri Ramakrishna's special message for this age. That alone was his splendor. So it's interesting that the first thing that she mentioned was not so much religious harmony, but the ideal of renunciation. Sri Ramakrishna himself said, "Who can have spiritual awakening? Only a person who has renounced their attachment to worldly things. Only by renunciation is ignorance destroyed." And here are the words of Swami Vivekananda. Without renunciation, there cannot be any spiritual growth. In all our yogas, this renunciation is necessary. This is the stepping stone and the real center and the real heart of all spiritual culture. Renunciation. This is religion. Renunciation. How can great spirituality come without renunciation? So you see, there's a lot of emphasis on the term and the ideal of renunciation. Now, why is the word renunciation often so intimidating? And a major reason why this ideal is intimidating is that it's often not understood that well. Several myths have grown around this ideal of renunciation, and today we'll try to take a look at some of them, some of the major ones. So like Ghostbusters, we can try to be mythbusters today. But first we'll have to identify which those myths are. The first myth regarding renunciation is that it is for monastics. It's not for others. This is the most prevalent myth. Every time the word renunciation comes, oh, that's for monks and nuns. It's not for lay people. Because for others, renunciation is neither necessary nor possible. That's the idea. Now, it's good to remember that the ideal of renunciation makes no distinction between monastics and lay people. The only difference renunciation recognizes is between spiritual seekers and worldly people. So that's where we can say renunciation is probably not as much higher on the list of those who are worldly as on the list of those who are spiritual seekers. But it doesn't make any distinction between monastics and non-monastics. The reason is renunciation is primarily a state of the mind, and it's independent of where the body lives. It's not whether you are at home or living in a monastery. It's not whether you are wearing a special kind of robe, a monastic robe, or wearing other kinds of clothes. It doesn't matter what you eat, and it doesn't even matter what social label a person carries. There are two types of renunciation. One is the inner renunciation, and the other is inner plus outer. These are the only two types available. And you can see, inner is common to both. So which type of renunciation a spiritual seeker will make their own might seem to be a matter of choice, but actually it's not so much a matter of choice. It's just the will of God. Although it might seem as if monastics have a greater power of renunciation than those who are not, that's not necessarily true. Renunciation can be practiced in anywhere and everywhere. I won't go through that whole incident again, but I have often narrated the story about Swami Akhandananda and his father, who came to see him off at the railroad station. Some of you might remember it. And how he saw that his father's renunciation was much greater than his own. So it's possible, wherever we may be, to practice the highest sacrifice. It's not only reserved for monastics. And Sri Ramakrishna therefore said that there are two kinds of yogis. He said there are Gupta yogis and Vyakta yogis. Gupta means hidden. So there are hidden yogis and there are visible yogis. What he meant was this, that if we are spiritual seekers, then we have to let go. We have to practice detachment. Now, in the case of some, that detachment may be completely internal. No one externally, what you do, where you are, no one might even know externally how detached you are. But internal detachment should be there for every spiritual seeker. Now, some among spiritual seekers might take vows of monasticism, for instance. And in their case, this ideal of renunciation may have a visible form, such as when you wear a monastic robe and then you have a special name. In Vedantic tradition, if you're called a Swami, or if you're a nun, you call a Pravrajika. Now, these are very visible forms, which makes it clear that this person has taken vows of renouncing. But that doesn't mean automatically, just because someone has a visible signs of renunciation, doesn't imply that the internal is always there. And that's why we find hypocrites and fakes in society who might externally make a lot of show about renunciation. They may not have renounced internally at all. But internal renunciation is common to every spiritual seeker. So that is the first myth, that the ideal of renunciation need not be restricted only to some special kind of people. If we are spiritual seekers, we have to be able to look within our heart and see how much detachment we have acquired. Look at Ramakrishna himself. He was not a monastic, he was not a Swami, he didn't have a special monastic robe, and yet we see the renunciation or detachment in the highest form manifested through his life. Same is true. The Buddha, of course, was a monk. But Jesus, for instance, there wasn't a visible sign that he had become a monk. But how can we distinguish Jesus' life, his tremendous sacrifice, his tremendous detachment, his tremendous renunciation, without necessarily distinguishing himself externally from others? What will distinguish ourselves from others is our inner qualities, not necessarily our external appearance. So that's the first myth, that renunciation is only for monastics, not for others. The second myth about renunciation is that because renunciation means giving up, it's very painful. To renounce, this is how the thinking goes. To renounce is to give up what we love and what we cherish. And this is obviously a very difficult and painful exercise. And therefore, many of us feel that I'm not really sure whether I can carry this pain all through my life. And therefore, I'd better not even try. So the idea that renouncing something is painful prevents many of us from even giving it a try, because it's like, oh, it's too much burden to carry all through my life. Now, what's to be remembered in this is that, yes, renunciation does mean giving up, but that's only half of the story. The other half is getting. So renunciation is not just giving up, it involves getting as well. Now, renunciation is both giving up and to get. Swami Vivekananda's words are very instructive in this regard. This is what Swami Vivekananda said. It is always for greater joy that you give up the lesser. This is practical religion, the attainment of freedom, renunciation. Renounce the lower so that you may get the higher. Renounce, sacrifice, give up, not for zero, not for nothing, but to get the higher. So that's the first thing to remember. Giving up is one thing, but we also getting something in its place, which then begs the question, which comes first? Do we give up first or do we receive first? And practicality requires that, well, it's better to get first and then give up. You give up and then what you had is lost and then you get nothing in return. And therefore, of course, you never are expected to give up unless you have got something. The idea is this: the lesser falls away by itself when the better arrives in life. It's like this. Let's say you are attached to a car, and many of us, if you had your car for a while, and then you develop a relationship with your car, for instance, and you start loving your car, no matter how old it may be, you kind of love it. And if someone says, why don't you give up your car? He said, no, I like my car. I'm not going to give it up. Now, let's say by some stroke of luck, you get a new car. Maybe some distant uncle dies and then you get it as a gift. So it's come a new car, a most updated version of car arrives. Now, when that car arrives, your attachment to the old car automatically goes away because you got something better. So the lesser one, so renouncing the old car at that point, it's not painful at all. In fact, keeping it would be painful if you don't have a parking slot for 2 cars. So you would gladly give away the older one. Now that is what renunciation is. It's not at all painful. So once you have found a higher ideal, once you have gotten something better, then the lesser one automatically drops off. Which is why sometimes when some spiritual seekers have this dilemma, oh, I need to practice meditation more, and so should I reduce my work or should I stop working so that I can give my full time for meditation? And the best answer is this: we don't have to stop working at all. We don't have to reduce our work at all. When we become fit for that kind of a sustained amount of practice, all other things which might at present seem to be obstacles or hurdles will fall away by themselves. We don't have to forcibly tear ourselves apart from it. In Sri Ramakrishna's life, you can see that he was a pujari. He did worship. He was employed as a priest in a Kali temple. And his mind was always immersed in God. But never did we find in his life he like complaining, oh, I have to go and now today do this chore, but I really would like to sit and meditate. It never happened. He carried out all of his responsibilities very meticulously, very sincerely, and the rest of the time he prayed. But then we see in his life that when his mind began to be absorbed into the divine continuously, that he became incapable of doing the duties that he was supposed to do. Not that he didn't want to do them, not that he shirked them, not that he gave them up. The duties gave him up. So that's what would happen. When we are fit for a higher ideal, a higher practice, the lower ideals will automatically slip away from us. And therefore, renunciation, understood in its right sense, is never painful. In fact, as I said, it can be the most joyful thing. If it's like this, if giving something up brings me pain, that means I still value it. And of course, if you value something and you're going to separate yourself from it, it is going to be painful. But once you've found something more valuable, then that which is of less value will automatically slip away. That is how renunciation is in fact the most natural, effortless thing that would happen. Myth 3 is that renunciation is the result of hatred or dislike. And we know from our own experience that what we don't like or what we hate, we can give up without hesitation. If you don't like bitter gourd, for instance, renouncing bitter gourd is very easy. It's not very painful. In fact, it's very joyful. That's what we always need to do. Start hating things so that you'll be able to give them up. But how to give up a thing that we love? So in order to renounce anything, I must develop hatred. That's the way of thinking of many people. Now, what we need to remember is this, that if we hate something, we cannot really renounce it. Our hatred for something might separate us from that thing physically, but it is our hatred that will keep us attached to it mentally. It's like sometimes if you say, I can't stand that person's company, that person is so obnoxious. But if my mind is always thinking of the obnoxiousness of that person, I'm still having the company of that person in my mind. So even intense dislike or intense hatred, rather than producing detachment, can in fact attach me more strongly to it. There is a story told about two in the Buddhist tradition. There were two monks, young monks, who were traveling or walking, going for a, sometime they walked in the olden days. And so they were walking along going from one village to another. And it seems that on the way they had to cross a small rivulet. And there's a small bridge across the river had somehow gotten broken. And so they couldn't use the bridge. They had to wade through that water. The water was about quite high, about chest deep water. And anyway, so these monks, they kind of got ready and to walk across the water. On the bank of on that river, they found a young woman, and she was weeping and crying. And then one of the monks asked her, "What's the matter?" Then she said, her mom lives on the other side, in the village on the other side of the river, and her mom was very seriously ill. And she was going there to take care of her mom. But now she's unable to cross the river because the bridge is broken, and she didn't know how to swim, and she was unable to cross it. And then this monk said, "Oh, that's the problem. Okay, why don't you just sit on my shoulder?" He just took her like piggyback, and just kind of take her on her back, and he took her across the river, and she thanked him profusely, and then she left. And then these monks started walking again. The other monk had become very serious. He didn't say a word. And after they had walked for a few miles, then this other monk asked this first monk, "Do you think you did the right thing?" And the first monk said, "What? About what?" And then the other monk said, "You're a monk. How could you kind of carry a young woman like that across the river? That's not right for monks to do." And then the first monk said, "Oh, that's what you are referring to." He said, "I left that woman 2 miles away just after crossing. You are still carrying her in your mind." Now, that's what I mean by attachment. Attachment is not simply about just having something physically near. In fact, most attachments are in the mind. And so, renunciation, therefore, is not the result of hatred. Intense hatred, intense dislike creates oftentimes more attachment than true love. And as I have mentioned on other occasions, really, true love is free from attachment. Attachment is a problem. Attachment is a hurdle in manifestation of true love. When people love, and if that love is intense, there is no attachment in it. Attachment actually reduces the intensity of love. So how do attachments fall off? Through consciously creating higher attachments. A better phrase for higher attachment is through love of God, or through love for the spiritual ideal. The more consciously a spiritual seeker tries to cultivate greater attachment, or greater love, if you will, for a higher ideal, for a spiritual ideal, all these lesser attachments will automatically drop off on their own. The example is a little bit like this. Think about another one example. Let's say a thief, extremely tired, longing for sleep, goes to a motel and finds a room and is about to crash and sleep. Then suddenly he gets the information that next to his room, a very wealthy person is occupying the next room and is carrying a bag filled with diamonds, if you like. Now, what would this thief do? This very professional thief who is dead tired and wants to sleep, but there is this wealthy person whose bag of diamonds. So this thief then will automatically renounce his need for sleep. Although it's not that he dislikes sleep, that's what he wants it. But this bag of diamond is a much greater prize, much greater reward for the thief, because of which the thief will easily renounce the sleep which he is greatly wanting. And so that's what I mean by when something of greater importance comes in our life, things which are less important automatically drop off. And that's how renunciation occurs. Fourth myth about renunciation is that it is very unnatural. And the thinking goes this way, that we have to be realistic. It is natural for human beings to want what they like, to have it, and to keep it with us as long as we can. Well, that's human nature. If I like something, I want it. And once I get it, I want to keep it with me. So if the things of the world make me happy, why should I renounce them? It's neither possible nor natural. Those who try to renounce are trying to go against nature. What they do is unnatural and probably even abnormal. In fact, there have been often one of the arguments that occurs in many of our monasteries, and I've seen it over the years now, when young men or women, when they come to join a monastery, oftentimes there is resistance from the family. And the argument that sometimes goes is, what if everyone becomes monks and nuns? How will the world go on? And I've heard it again and again, and many of you may have heard that as well. And the answer, of course, is that, first of all, not everyone wants to be a monk or nun. Not everyone is going to join a monastery. And even those who choose not to become monks or nuns are not doing it like, I would like to be a monk, but the world has to go on. That's never the thing. But that's one of the kind of an argument that's often given. So one of the things that life will teach us sooner or later, if it has not taught us already, is that the majority need not always be right. Or what the majority does need not always be considered natural. We have seen, even in democracy, for instance, works on the idea that the majority will generally do what is right. But sometimes we know they get it wrong. And that's why we sometimes have leaders which people are not too happy about. And so what is natural and what is not natural is something that needs to be thought over. A thing does not become natural or normal just because the majority do it or because it is very spontaneous. Now, if you, for instance, go to a clinic which treats people with mental illness. Now, in an institution like that, there are doctors, there are people who treat the patients, but the majority there, the number of doctors and nurses are smaller usually compared to the patients that they treat. So in that particular little world, if the majority is considered normal or natural, then we'll have a very different understanding. So does, in that situation, what the majority do, does it automatically make it natural? Does it automatically make it normal? According to Vedanta, the world is itself a kind of a cosmic clinic, if you like, of mental illness. The word that is used in many Vedanta texts, they call it bhava roga. Roga is a disease, and bhava means a disease of worldliness. So this whole universe can be seen as one big institution in which all of us are suffering. Now, what the majority does here, therefore, is neither natural nor normal. Only when we behave according to our true nature can we say that things are natural. And what is our true nature? According to Vedanta, our true nature is we are infinite, pure, free beings. According to true nature, we are really unattached and our existence is completely unfettered. Now that is why recognizing and experiencing our infinite nature, recognizing that we are pure, free, divine beings, that way of living is a natural way of living. And if we have not experienced that yet, if we are not making an effort to live according to that yet, then we are really not natural, we are not normal. So in spiritual life, therefore, what we might say is that those whom we worship and adore as incarnation or prophets or saviors, they're really a very enlightened minority. They're never in majority. So if what the majority does is normal, then we said they are abnormal people. But what we see is that they are the only truly sane people in this world. The rest of us are striving to come closer to what they represent. And so therefore, what is natural and what is normal need not be what the majority does. Now, how do we know that our nature is pure, perfect, and free? We know this because some amongst us in every generation have experienced it. And they got that experience through sacrifice, through renunciation. Now, it might seem strange that the majority would behave contrary to their nature with only a handful of people following the natural path. Now, this strange situation occurs because, according to Vedanta, the primary problem is ignorance. Sometimes in Vedantic text, some of the Vedanta teachers compare this world to a kind of a rowdy bar where semi-conscious people move about, dazed, intoxicated, delirious, knocking one another down, screaming and abusing, sometimes weeping and wailing. But look at the bartender. When you go to a bar, other people can do all this stuff, but the bartender is generally calm, expected to be very sober and alert, because the bartender knows he should not do what others are doing there. A bartender is aware of his responsibilities, and he knows, of course, that I'm making money. The more these fellows drink, the more money I make. Now, other people in the bar think that they are having a good time, but actually, they are not gaining anything. The one person who is gaining in that bar is the bartender who is not drinking. In fact, the other people who think they are having a good time are actually losing quite a lot. They are losing money, they are losing sanity, and if they are regulars, they are likely on a very self-destructive spree, which is going to affect their family life and professional life. That is the difference between them and the bartender. They are ignorant, and the bartender has knowledge of who he is and what his responsibility is. So as spiritual seekers, when we go about the world, this is no excuse to say, well, everyone's doing it, so I should do it. No, if everyone's doing it, that doesn't automatically mean that I should do it. Well, everyone can be doing stupid things. That doesn't give me any license to do stupid thing myself, because, I can still do it, but I'm the one who will suffer. And therefore, if you keep this imagery of the bar in mind, try to be a bartender. Enjoy while others are making fools of themselves, and we can be alert. So when we have knowledge of who we really are, what the purpose of life is, that why we are here in the first place, then our lives will become natural and normal. The urge to let go is a sign that the sun of knowledge is about to rise on our mental horizon. So keeping this in mind, we will recognize, therefore, that renunciation is a very natural thing to do. It's not unnatural at all. And one other myth, the final one that I will discuss today, is that renunciation really is a form of escapism. And this is another one argument that sometimes is made about renunciation, that life is full of challenges and we must face these challenges bravely. We must take our responsibilities and duties in life seriously, but renunciation is nothing but escapism, running away from our duties, an excuse to evade challenges and to get around one's responsibilities and duties. And therefore, renunciation is for cowards and for weak people. On the contrary, an answer to that we might say that renunciation is really for the brave and the bold. The challenge of renunciation is the greatest challenge in life. The responsibilities and duties that life of renunciation bring are more severe, more difficult than all other responsibilities and duties put together. Renunciation is not escapism. In fact, avoiding the challenge of renunciation, avoiding the challenge of sacrifice, that is escapism. Vedanta teachers say that we have to make a distinction between escape and escapism. Now, not every form of escape is escapism. And not everyone who tries to escape is an escapist. To escape from something in itself is nothing wrong or nothing bad. When it rains, we all try to escape getting wet by finding some shelter or using an umbrella. And here, in the areas in which we live, if it snows, trying to escape from snow, you say, oh, what a coward you are. We don't say that. It just makes sense. If you are smart enough, you'll try to keep yourself safe in difficult situations. Now, think about 9/11, when the plane struck the World Trade Center, for instance, and people who were on those towers, now those who were trying to get down the stairwell and somehow get out of that building, would you call those people escapist? Would you call that escapism? Well, here there is a danger, and you would say, well, the smart thing is to try to get away from it as quickly as possible. So what we escape from and why we do it are important considerations. On them depends the rightness or wrongness of an action. So coming to renunciation, we must ask, what are we escaping from and why we are doing it? So if I want to say, it's like this, there is some responsibility I have, some duty I have, and you know what, I just hate that work. So let me just renounce that work. Now, that is a problem that would be an escapism, that here is something that I am not able to deal with. Here is something that I know I have to do, but I hate it. And I find, well, let me just running away like a coward from it. Let me glorify that cowardly act by saying, I'm renouncing it. It doesn't work that way. That would be a very cowardly thing. But on the other hand, if a house is on fire, and say I'm trapped in that house. Now what is the challenge before me? To stay on and perish in that fire, or to escape from that fire? Now worldly life, a life devoted to the perishable things which won't last forever. If all my life is invested in things which are going to perish sooner or later, then it's like being on a house on fire. And the only sane thing in that situation is to escape from that. And that is what renunciation stands for. If we don't escape, we shall perish. And the fire of disharmony, desire, and death will finally consume us. Now, is this kind of escaping selfishness? Won't it be better to stay on and help? That's one thing. If I find myself, say, in a house on fire, it might say, well, if you're trying to escape from it, you're forgetting the other people who are in that home. Wouldn't it make sense to go and help them? Absolutely. We must help as many as possible. But the important thing is here. If I'm also trapped in that fire, and if I don't know how to get out of the house, I won't be able to help anyone. It's possible that if I don't know the way out, my desire to help others, I might be putting them in greater danger than if I had left them to themselves. So even if I have to help others, I must first find a way out myself. I must know this is the way to go out. And then it would be tremendously courageous to say, then you go back in again and then help others go out. That's understandable. But saying that not going out or trying and saying that I want to help others unless and until I'm able to help myself just doesn't work that way. If I want to bring peace to other people, I must have peace in my own heart. I want to spread love among other people, I must have love in my own heart. If I don't have it here, I can't share it with others. I can't help others. And therefore, escaping from a house on fire is not escapism. That's in fact the most sane thing to do. But having known the way out, then going back in and helping others makes complete sense. That is what all the great ones, all the sages, saints, saviors have done. They found the way out and then they went back in again and tried to help us all. And that is why we remember today. And that's why they are such an inspiration to all of us today. Secondly, it's not as if also that everyone is anxious to renounce. That's why sometimes I encourage Vedanta students not to be too aggressive with their desire to help. That is, sometimes we may be more eager to help people who are not so eager to receive your help. In such cases, you are probably not doing any good. If at all, you are actually creating more trouble. And therefore, we might ask why it looks strange that if people in general don't want to escape from the fire of worldliness to the joy of freedom of spirituality. And that's why some of us may have experiences when you have a friend circle who may not necessarily share your enthusiasm for spiritual life, and then you kind of bring up some spiritual topic, everyone kind of rolls their eyes, are like, oh, wow, we are not interested, kind of a situation. And then we might say, why? Something that seems so obvious to you that this is the wonderful path, and why is it that then it doesn't inspire many other people, maybe some amongst your own friend circle? That's the reality in which we live. That sometimes those who see things clearly would want to do the right thing, but many are not able to see things clearly, and we should definitely try to help others as much as we can, but making sure that our help is needed and our help will lead to some good results. And that's why sometimes it is said, to help anyone can, but to help at the right time, the right person, and in a right way is the ability of the wise. So real bravery consists in heroically overcoming the obstacles to our escape from fire, and renunciation is what helps us do it. It shows us the way to peace and bliss. So I very briefly touched upon 5 major myths about renunciation. And although so far I have spoken about renunciation purely from a spiritual standpoint, meaning that renunciation was automatically assumed to be renunciation of worldliness, now that assumption made renunciation appear as almost like an optional activity, practiced by some and not practiced by others. But such is not really the case. I would just end finally by mentioning to you that if we look a little bit more deeply, we might find that everyone really practices renunciation without exception. If we stop assuming that renunciation means renunciation of worldliness, we shall see that everyone around us, living and non-living, are practicing renunciation. Good students renounce their leisure to study for the upcoming examination. Some other student perhaps renounce their study to spend time with friends or watch television. A mother renounces the pleasure of good long sleep to take care of her little baby. A businessman may renounce the values learnt in childhood to make a fast buck. Politicians may renounce their self-esteem and flatter others to seek lucrative positions in the government. And we can find many such examples that everyone is trying to give up something which they think is lower to get something which they think is higher. Now, what they think is higher and what they think is lower, your perception might vary. But in their eyes, what they think is superior, they willingly let go of what is inferior. We find that renunciation is practiced by animals as well. Dogs renounce a cookie if they are offered a bone. A lion renounces his prey if he senses that hunters are zeroing in on him. A mother bird collects food and renounces it for her babies waiting for her in the nest. If we are poets, we shall see renunciation being practiced in nature as well. When the roots of a tree are watered, they don't keep all the water to themselves. They pass it on to the rest of the tree. A tree renounces its fruits for us to eat. We really don't know. When you plug the tree and eat, we don't know whether the tree is angry or not. Renunciation is the law of life. We all renounce, we have no choice. Our only choice lies in what we renounce. On the choice we make depends the life that we create for ourselves. If we choose to renounce falsehood, hatred, jealousy, greed, worldly desires, our life becomes a blessing to ourselves and to society. We don't have to await death to reach the kingdom of heaven. We can find ourselves in the heavenly kingdom here itself if we intelligently choose what to renounce and what to keep. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. This week we'll continue to have the Gita class. The Vedanta study group will meet on Wednesday. We'll continue with the study of chapter 18. On Tuesday and Saturday, our Arati and meditation will also continue as usual at 6 o'clock, provided there are no more snowstorms in this week. And next Sunday, our Satsang subject will be purity, patience, and perseverance. Let's conclude with a prayer now on page 3. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto you.